What's going on, everybody? Kalipus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now, before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you want to learn more about either of these phones individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.8-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 395, an aspect ratio of 20.5 by 9, and an 85.8% screen-to-body ratio. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 6.4-inch 120Hz dynamic AMOLED display with a resolution of 1080p, a PPI of 411, an aspect ratio of 20 by 9, and a screen-to-body ratio of 85.3%. So both of these phones do have really good displays. On one hand, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, clearly this display is much larger, and this tends to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. And in addition to this, with an aspect ratio of 20.5 by 9 versus 20 by 9, the Moto G Stylus 5G is going to have a slightly taller and more narrow form factor. So when you're doing something like watching a video, for example, in landscape mode, you're going to get a more immersive experience. And if you're doing something like reading an article or scrolling through social media, you'll be able to fit more content on the screen without having to scroll as much. Now, on the other hand, despite the advantage the Moto G Stylus has in size and dimensions, I would say the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE definitely has a much higher quality display. Despite them both having 1080p resolutions, with a dynamic AMOLED versus an IPS LCD, the display technology in the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is a lot better, and this is going to make the colors a little bit brighter and more vibrant, and the viewing angles are much better. So if you're outside in the sun, for example, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be much easier to see than the Moto G Stylus 5G. So again, at the end of the day, both phones do have really good displays. It just comes down to what kind of advantages you'd rather have. If you'd rather have a larger display with a taller and more narrow form factor, then the Moto G Stylus 5G might be a better choice. But if you'd rather have a higher quality display with nicer looking colors and better viewing angles, then the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will have an advantage there. Now for storage, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 128GB with no microSD card expansion. Now keep in mind the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does in fact have another variant, so if you do want 256GB on this phone, you can get it, but the big disadvantage the S21 FE has here is that there's no microSD card expansion. And again, for the purpose of this video, this specific S21 FE in my hand does have 128GB, so in the case of these two phones, the Moto G Stylus 5G in this video has doubled the storage. Now that being said, in my opinion, 128GB really is not a bad amount of internal storage. Most people are probably not going to fill that up, but again, if you do have a lot of apps and photos and videos and stuff like that, with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, in that case, you will want to get the higher variant, whereas with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this phone already has 256GB and microSD card expansion, so if you are more of a power user, between these two phones, the Moto G Stylus 5G will probably have an advantage. But again, for the average user, 128GB of internal storage, even without microSD card expansion, should be perfectly fine. Now for security features, both phones do have fingerprint scanners. With the Moto G Stylus 5G, it's right here on the power key, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, it's in the display. So definitely looks real nice and premium. And in addition to the fingerprint scanners, both phones have face unlock as well. But that being said, starting with the Moto G Stylus 5G, let's give these fingerprint scanners a try and see how well they work. So there we go, one more time. And there we go. Moving on to the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see there, both fingerprint scanners were real fast and responsive, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones also do have face unlock, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, these phones have pretty much the exact same design for the front-facing camera. With the Moto G Stylus 5G, this camera is 16 megapixels, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this camera is 32 megapixels. On the back with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we got a triple camera setup with a 50 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera that doubles as a macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we got a triple camera setup as well, with a 12 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel telephoto lens, and a 12 megapixel ultra-wide camera. So both of these phones do have really good camera setups, but one thing I do want to point out here right away is that despite the difference in megapixels, with the Moto G Stylus 5G having a 50 megapixel camera and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE only having 12, this doesn't exactly mean the Moto G Stylus 5G is going to take better photos. In fact, in this case, it's actually the opposite, because with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, keep in mind this is an entry-level flagship phone, and while it's not going to be quite up there with the Samsung Galaxy S22 Ultra, the sensor in this camera is still quite a bit better than your average mid-range phone, and because of this, the photos this phone takes are really good. So if you're looking for the best quality between the two, then the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will have a huge advantage here. And as far as features go, both of these phones again do have ultra-wide cameras, but the difference here is that the Moto G Stylus 5G has a macro camera, and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a telephoto lens. Now, depending on how you look at this, a telephoto lens might be a little bit more useful because you can use it not only for its intended purpose, getting high quality images from farther away, but you can also sort of use it as a macro camera too, because when you use the telephoto lens to zoom in on something that's already pretty close to you, you are going to get pretty much the same effect you do with a macro camera. So in general, as far as the overall camera setups go, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is going to be quite a bit better, but if you're a more casual camera user and you just want to get a few nice photos here and there, the Moto G Stylus 5G will still get the job done. Now for video, it's the same kind of thing. The videos recorded with the Moto G Stylus 5G aren't really bad, but it does have a max quality of 1080p at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone has a max quality of 4K at 60 frames per second in both the rear and front cameras. So again, while the photos and videos you get with the Moto G Stylus 5G really aren't bad by any means, the camera setup with this phone is significantly outclassed by the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Now as far as RAM and processor go, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. With the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 888 5G processor. Now I ran Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a single core score of 622 and a multi-core score of 1928, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a single core score of 1081 and a multi-core score of 3227. So clearly here, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE has a huge advantage in performance, which obviously that is to be expected. This after all is an entry-level flagship phone, whereas the Moto G Stylus 5G is really just a mid-range phone. But that being said, for a mid-range phone, the Moto G Stylus 5G still does have really good performance, and if you're doing more basic activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, this phone will get the job done. And in my experience, even for more high-performance activities like mobile gaming, the Moto G Stylus 5G still does perform decently well. But then again, of course, if you want the best performance between the two, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will have a huge advantage. That being said, what I recommend doing is running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of which phone is a more appropriate upgrade for you. You might find that while the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is obviously the faster of the two, the Moto G Stylus 5G might be a good enough upgrade already. Now as far as the battery goes, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 5000 mAh battery that supports 15-watt fast charging, and with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, we're getting a 4500 mAh battery that supports 25-watt fast charging. So with a slightly larger battery, the Moto G Stylus 5G is going to get better life per charge, as well as slightly better longevity down the road. But on the other hand, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE really doesn't have a small battery, and honestly, I will say I use this phone so much, and I've never had any battery issues with it, and for that matter, I really use this phone to record most of the videos on this channel, and again, the battery life on this phone is really great. In addition to this, the 25-watt fast charging definitely makes a difference if you have a good fast charger, and not only that, but the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE does have wireless charging, whereas the Moto G Stylus 5G doesn't. But of course, if you want the largest battery between the two, the Moto G Stylus 5G will have an advantage, but if you want better charging features, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will have a bit of an edge there. Another thing to keep in mind is that both phones do have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, you can do that with either phone. But in conclusion, which of these devices is better? Now, as you probably already knew going into this video, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE objectively is the better device here, being significantly higher end than the Moto G Stylus 5G. But that being said, just specs on paper aren't everything, and the real question is, which one is actually going to be a better choice for you? Sure, on one hand, if you want the highest end device with the best performance, best quality display, best camera, and really just all around a more premium design and better features, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE will be the way to go. But if you're not going to be taking a ton of photos, recording 4K videos, or doing higher end activities like mobile gaming, and you just want a solid mid-range phone with a good processor, a decent camera, and a nice large display that's great for consuming content, the Moto G Stylus 5G will really not be a bad option. And another thing I always forget to mention is the Moto G Stylus 5G, obviously, as the name suggests, does have a stylus, whereas with the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE, this phone of course doesn't, and it also doesn't have a headphone jack, whereas the Moto G Stylus 5G does have one of those, so that's another couple things to keep in mind. But again, overall, at the end of the day, if you want the highest end, most premium phone between the two that really is going to have the best performance, the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE is obviously the better choice there. But again, if you're just looking for a solid, dependable mid-range phone and you really don't need anything fancy, the Moto G Stylus 5G is still going to be a great choice. But this concludes my comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2022 and the Samsung Galaxy S21 FE. Once again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about them in the description, as well as some information about pricing and availability, because this is always changing. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipa's Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.